Alright, so we are up to Module 7, and what we're going to take a look at today is the actual performance indicators, and we went through all 8 steps of that revenue process and went through them, and you saw the different elements, and so now we want to take a look at when I'm done with my roller coaster ride and I've got my ticket to the amusement park and I've gone through Donald Duck and made sure I was tall enough to get on the ride, and I got locked and loaded on the ride, took off up the hill for charge posting, the payment posting, the corkscrew third-party recovery statements went out, and then I come to the end and the roller coaster jolts to a stop, and I as the management team look down and say, what is going on? 10 people went out, 5 came back. 20 went out, 10 came back. Why aren't more people coming back? Where am I broke? This is where we're going to go through and take a look at the why is it broke. So the last step of the process, which is the last part of the whole roller coaster ride, hopefully you videoed that analogy because I'm going to reference it a couple times. You're going to see we're going to take a look at 20 people went out, 20 people came back, great, and what's the indicators to really tell me in my revenue process, the 8 steps of that revenue process, this being the 8th, how do I know? So we're going to take a look at those indicators. So we have 8 indicators. Similar to how we have 8 steps of the revenue process, we have 8 indicator groupings that we take a look at. Each of these kind of work hand in hand. We're going to go through each one individually, but we have days in accounts receivable, which is how long does it take me to get paid. I send a bill today, do I get paid tomorrow? 10 days, 20 days, 40 days, 90 days, 100 days, 120 days. Aging, how old's my AR? I want to look at the accounts receivable ratio of how much business did I do this month, impact how much is outstanding. I want to look at collection rates, how good am I at collecting money. I want to look at adjustments. Why are you writing stuff off? I sent bills. I don't want adjustments, I want money. So why are we adjusting stuff? And take a look at that. And then we want to look at just some performance things about how long does it take from the date of service to the date the claim submitted, and why does that exist? Why does that gap occur, and how to shorten it? What's our account posting time frames? Am I okay to receive a payment on Monday and a week and a half later post it? Absolutely not. But again, where's my indicator that says it's not okay? And then the contractual monitoring. So let's start with the first one, days in accounts receivable. Days in accounts receivable is going to say how long does it take me to get paid. Used to be, 60 days was acceptable, 45 days was acceptable, but the more and more technology we get to where I can submit a clean claim, scrub it, get it out the door, basically go through the roller coaster ride, I should be getting paid. So we now know that best practices is you should get paid in less than 30 days. I send a bill today, I should expect payment in less than 30 days. In fact, if it's Medicare, I actually will accept electronic payment with the funds deposited straight into my bank account in 14 days if my claim is clean. How do I know my claim's clean? Because I put a scrubber in place. Remember when we talked about scrubbing claims to make sure they're clean? That increases the fact that, that'll help you. Now, what will cause me longer delays in accounts receivable? If I see a VA patient. If I see a VA patient, I know I'm not getting paid for 6 to 9 months because that just happens to be how the Veterans Administration works. If it's a work comp claim, chances are that's going to be delayed. Auto liability. First of all, I just turn that to private pay and make the patient pay me and not worry about it. But if you accept auto liability and you're going to sit around and wait for the liability to follow through, that's going to take time. HFMA is using a 55 days reported target because they're factoring in those VA claims and things in that regard. If you look at general practices, though, 30 days. If your business office comes to you and they say their days in accounts receivable is 62, 78, 80, anything greater than 30, that's not really acceptable unless they justify it down at the bottom, number 5. Payer mix might drive your DAR days in accounts receivable value up. Not all practices are the same, but more or less 30 is your number. How do you calculate it? Easy. My annual charges are $400,000. That means my daily average charges are $1,594. Take my accounts receivable, divide it by my average daily charges, 29.1 days in my accounts receivable. Perfect. Right on. Aged accounts receivable. What's my aging look like? Well, I would expect my accounts to be 99% under 30 days if my days in accounts receivable is 29.1, so there is no aging. Well, that's an average. So we do know that we're going to have claims that age out. Where I submit a claim today, maybe they deny it, and they want to give me requests for medical records, and then I got to get more information from the patient on secondaries, and we're going to look at an audit, or anything the health plan is trying to do to delay payment of that claim, that's going to create you an aging bucket. But if I have 50% of my accounts receivable over 120 days, I know that's wrong. I know there's an issue because I know industry is 10% of my claims should be over 120 days, 10% over 90 days, and really never should you have more than 25% of your AR over 90 days. Now, better performing practices are going to say 10% over 90 days is all we're going to allow because we got our act together. But really, 25% should never have more than 25% over 90 days. Most of your AR should be current. If I have a 29.1 days in accounts receivable, that's going to tell me that more than half of my AR should be sitting in the 0 to 30 bucket. So this just gives you some benchmarks when you start working with your staff. It used to be at 30 days you start calling on claims. At 60 days you start doing this. At 90 days you start doing that. 30 to 60, you see there I put consider correspondence, phone call status checks. Basically I'm saying get your act together and start working these claims. Well, that 30, 60, 90 model of tasks occurring at a monthly interval is gone. Because if I use my healthcare claim status inquiry, I should know within the week that I send the claim what is going on with the carrier. I know if I ping Aetna and say, hey, submitted a claim on Tuesday, Friday, what's my status? And they say A1, I know they've got the claim. I should be able to ping them next week and have them tell me it's paid, requesting additional information so that 2 weeks out, I'm already working that claim and I don't need to wait for the paper to arrive 30 days later to say, oh, hey, we need more information. I've already pinged and figured that out 2 weeks after the claim was submitted. So my accounts receivable team is working not aged accounts, but they're working claims that got submitted and making sure that they're going to be paid timely so I can have the luxury of a 29.1 days in AR. If I don't have those types of workflows in place, you can see how quickly your aging buckets can grow. So if I have my little report I'm looking at here and I'm going 55% of my AR is current, that makes me feel happy. 12% is over 91 days. We know 25% is the industry number. In my shop, I tend to prefer 10%. But we know that's reasonable. And all of a sudden, if I see this trending and I start seeing the 61 to 90 becoming 55, the 91 to 120 becoming 33, I'm going to be like, nobody's working these accounts. This stuff's just aging. And if I want to have a good days in accounts receivable 29.1, I sure can't let this stuff age out because this is going to impact that other indicator. So now the indicators are starting to work together where one falls hand in hand. So all of the stars have to align to make me know I've got this account functioning. If one indicator's off, then that's going to start throwing other indicators off and it's going to say there's a problem somewhere. So that's sort of our accounts receivable piece. Let's look at another one, AR ratio. How much of what I did this month, my current receivables, my current gross production for this month, how much of an impact did it have on my AR? I'm hoping that it's a 1, which means almost all of my accounts receivable is made up of stuff I did this month. And maybe 2 is okay. 2.5, 2.25, 2.75 is where everyone average exists. I'm not average. I like to be in the 0-1, which is good. I don't want to be an average practice. But gosh, if I have 4 times my AR, that means what I did this month has very little impact. That right there is going to say you have a problem, if nothing else. In a family practice median, because I'm picking on family practice today, as you notice, 1.23 is the median. 25th percentile is 0.99. That means they're getting paid in less than 30 days on a consistent basis where their AR doesn't impact that. Now you could say, oh, well, they just keep adjusting everything off and they keep their AR real low. Well, that's going to impact collection rates that we're getting ready to talk about next. So your AR ratio, the formula, you take your accounts receivable, you divide it by your average monthly charges or your gross production, and that comes out, in this case, 1.39. That means I've got 1.3 times the average monthly charges that exist in my overall accounts receivable. And if you look at it, it makes sense. My average monthly charges are $33,000. My AR is $46,000. I've got something more than 1 times my current month, my average monthly charges in my AR. But if that was 2, 3, 4, 5 times my monthly charges, hey, something's going on. And when that happens, You know that's going to impact your aging buckets. You know that's going to impact your days in AR. And now all of a sudden, all these indicators are going to be off. That should be sending red flags that this is not going to create a financially viable, sustainable practice model. Got to get these things working so that I know 20 people went out on my roller coaster, 20 came back, and this is such a fun ride. So let's talk about those collection rates. Gross collections are just that. How much did I collect against how much I charged? Now, we already had our charge module, so we learned about how to set a charge, and we all know why the charge is sometimes set so ridiculously high. So if a practice comes up to me and says, hey, we get 80% of our billed charges, I'm going to look, and they take insurance, and they're like 95% insurance only type practice, I'm going to look at them and go, wow, you're leaving money on the table. I can almost guarantee it, because your gross collection rate in an insurance-based model of practice, you shouldn't be there. Now, if I was 100% concierge, private pay, things in that regard, yes, I'd expect a higher gross collection rate because I'd expect to get more closer to what my charges are. But in all, we should be sitting in that 40, 35, 55, 40, 60 range is really where we should be in a gross collection rate, considering the fact that I'm taking insurance and I've got carriers and some private pay and, the average mix. I don't have like all work comp or something in that regard. Net collections, my NCR rate is going to be taking my charges, getting rid of those contractual adjustments, and then dividing by the payments, which is saying of the allowable amounts you've contracted with on your contracts. So my charge is $200. I get my allowable rate's $100. That's a 50% gross collection rate. Of that $100 allowable, how much of that did you collect? That's taking the contractual adjustments out of the formula, or the adjustments out of the formula, and saying, divided by the payments, saying how much did you get. That better be like 99%. Here, really, actually, the MGMA's private practice benchmarks are 95.68, HFMA's 95.5. You better be over 95%. That means 95% of the collectible money you collected. So that's an important number. That's bringing into consideration what? Bad debt is less than 5%. Now, I think bad debt should be less than 3%, so we'll say 3 to 5% bad debt. That means of my allowable rate, I couldn't collect 3 to 5% of that, so I'm expecting a 95, 96% net collection rate. That's of the money that I'm expecting to collect, not a gross, which is off my charges. So what's that look like? Oops, dropped some numbers here. So charges are $200,000. My payments are $75,000. 200 divided by 75,000 is 38,000. 38%, excuse me. My payments divided by charges minus adjustments gives me a 97%. That means 97% of what I should be collecting, I'm collecting, but that's factored off the adjustments. Well, if someone comes in and says you have an 80% net collection rate, well, if I just increase those adjustments, I'm going to get my number up there. Well, if you increase your adjustments but don't collect more, that's going to impact your gross collection rates. That's going to impact other indicators that's going to bring that to attention, including the one that we should be looking at, which is monitoring your adjustments. Just because you got paid $100,000, how do you know you shouldn't have had 110, 120, 130,000? What are they adjusting off in my office? So we have to also look at what are my average adjustments. So if I look at my $123,000 in annual adjustments, basically $10,000 a month, and then all of a sudden I come in and Betty has added $30,000 of adjustments this month, that's going to make me freak out. I'm going to be like, why did you adjust $30,000 this month? We were running a $10,000 adjustment average. You just spiked this up to $30,000. What'd you do? Did the doctor say get your net collection rate up and so you just adjust stuff off to get them happy? No, you can't do that. The other thing we got to make sure you don't do is use custom codes. You just don't go in there and create codes to adjust. You actually use the true industry recognized claim adjustment reason codes. You need to communicate why a claim or service line was paid differently than when it was billed, and there's a standardized code in our industry used for that. It's the CAS code, or your claim adjustment reason codes. Don't go creating stuff. We have the privilege of standardized data sets. We have the privilege of claim status inquiries. We have the privilege of all of this being computerized and standardized. When you go in and just start making up stuff, you're going to mess everything up. You're going to mess up filing your secondary claims. You're going to mess up all kinds of stuff. So you do need to look at your adjustments. You need to use industry recognized adjustment codes, and your business office better be ready to explain why. Very often, I think if you think about it, how many of your practices do you go, hey, let me see what you're adjusting? You just assume all the adjustments are correct, and they're not adjusting stuff off or writing things off that wouldn't be valid. It's the easiest way to get rid of a bunch of work on your desk is just adjust it off. Doesn't result in money, but you know what? Did you even know you're supposed to be collecting it? That's why you have indicators, so that when all the stars align, you know you're doing a good job. Performance, date of service, to the date the claim submitted. We all know what we're going to talk about right now. We're going to talk about that chart you can't get done when the patient's there in front of you, and it's an unrealistic expectation that I can do my charting and get my charges done today. I got to work on it tonight, or I'm going to take care of it this weekend, or I'm going to chart on the patient I saw 5 days later. Absolutely not. That is the most poor performance I've ever seen. You need to see your patient today, chart it tonight, chart it today, but you need to get it done, and you need to get it done today or tomorrow. If you're inpatient and you're charting and it's going to go to coders get a day or so to look at it, I need to get all these claims in and out that door this week. So when you sit there and you have everyone's on my back getting these charts done and they're worried about getting the charges out, if I have a 13-day lag between the date of service and the day the claim goes out, you've just put 13 days on my accounts receivable, if you will, where I have not even submitted the claim because you can't get your act done to get the chart signed and done. Now you say, oh, I'll send the charges over and finish the chart later. Not if you have a compliance officer that's going to pay attention to what you're doing, because that's not allowed. And I would love to have you never finish that chart, Medicare come back in, health plans come back in, do an audit and realize you submitted charges on a chart that wasn't either documented, signed, or in place. I'll recoup all that money and put you in a full-blown audit. So get your charts done, finish the patient encounter, submit your charges, sign your chart, and call it a day. Now, missing charges should be 0. Remember back in my charge posting revenue process step, what did I say? Everybody on the schedule should have a charge. Everybody on the census in the emergency room, or that you rounded on that hospital today that had your name tagged to it, better have a charge in our system, and somebody better be checking that. Because at this point, I'm going to look at missed charges and go, a 5% mischarge ratio, and say, is that acceptable? Good God, no, it's not acceptable. I don't want to miss any charges. So if you do your charge posting protocol right, step 5 of the revenue process, this indicator should work well for you. I know nobody fell off my roller coaster ride. My FPRR, which is my first pass resolution rate, industry is only 70% of the claims are paid first time they're submitted. Well, good God, that means 30% of what I'm sending is not going to get paid, and I'm going to have to work the denial and manage that? Well, that's not acceptable. And it isn't acceptable, because why are you not using that claim editor? Remember we talked about that? Why are you not scrubbing your claims, using a Strong's Rules engine so that your FPRR rate can get up to 97%? So your first pass resolution rate is 97%, which means when I'm on that roller coaster ride going up the first hill, I'm going to go down the first hill and get paid. I'm not going to be the 30% falling out on the corkscrew. No, that's not acceptable. And if you find that you are at a 70% first time pass resolution rate, you got a problem. Posting time frames. My denial rate is barely less than 5% of gross production. Well, if I have a 70% first pass rate, I know that denials are coming in greater than my 5% of gross production. So you need to be working on that. Average performers denial rates between 5 and 10%. I'm not average. I'm above average, and I expect everyone in my office to be above average, so we will have a less than 5% gross production rate. And guess what? We're going to figure out how to get there if we're not there. You need to be looking at these things. Your practice needs to be looking at these things. Do they even know what their denial rates are? If you don't have the ability to know, you can't make sure you're performing well. It's another indicator. Bad debt, we already discussed, 3%. Some sources reflect a value of 5%. Why do I have bad debt? If I have a credit card on file when the patient's responsibility comes due, I'm charging the thing, right? I'm not chasing people down and finding bad addresses and they lied to me. Proactive, get the payments up front. You won't have these issues in the back end. How do I know I'm doing well? My indicators are going to tell me that kind of stuff. Payment exception reporting. We talked about those adjustments. My contract, remember my network? My network was up in that top left box, and I had the TPA, and I had my medical management, and I had my insurance, those 4 boxes we've looked at several times. My contract allowable rate for me holding a contract in that network, in that top left box, had $1.25. That was my allowable rate, $1.25. When the third-party administrator processed it down in the bottom right corner, they allowed $1. Well, wait a second, it should be $1.25. Why'd you allow $1? I just lost a quarter. Actually, MGMA says that they estimate payers underpay practices in the United States by an average of 7 to 11%. On $1 million practice, that's $70,000 to $110,000. I'll take that money all day long. Those quarters start adding up. Is your practice even paying attention? Are they even aware? Are they running any type of report to say, oh, my allowable rate is $1.25, Aetna only allowed $1, I need to go after the extra 25 cents. And as soon as someone in your practice says, honey, I've been doing this for years and years and years, and I just know this stuff like the back of my hand. No, they're not. Things change year after year. The way life ran 3-5 years ago is not how life runs today. And if you've been doing this for 20 years, 12 years, 15 years, and honey, you know what you're doing, I don't think you're keeping up with the times when you make a comment like that to me. You need to have a reimbursement matrix. I want an audit, and I want to see those exception reports, and I want to show the numbers. That's how we had found $50,000 for one practice. There's real money there. 7 to 11% is real cash. This needs to be something you're monitoring and watching in your business office of your practice. This contributes to the financial health and your ability to run your business. So, we looked at understanding our performance benchmarks and targets. We now know what are the things we need to be looking at. Well, to be looking at those things and coming up with those calculations means you need to have data. And how do you get data? Every month there should be about 10 different metrics you're getting from your people. And you go, oh my God, I never see any reports from anybody. I just work and I get a paycheck and I go home at the end of the day. Well, shame on you, because you should be more engaged. Even as an employee, you should know, hey, here's what I'm doing. I always look at this relationship again. Go back to my provider setup. 01 is doctor collaborator. 02 provider ID number is nurse practitioner U. And then when Cigna has that goofy preparer rule that says you have to bill Cigna under the collaborating physician, do not let the office put that work under 01. You create a provider number 03 that looks just like 01 but is a nurse practitioner billing under the doctor's name. So that way, 2 people in your practice, there's 3 provider billing numbers. 1 for the doctor, 1 for you as a nurse practitioner when you're billed under you, like the Medicare, and the third one, which is nurse practitioner work, billed under the doctor's name, but with work done by the nurse practitioner. Because the last thing we want to do is give credit to the doctor for work we did. Because at the end of the day, the doctor's going to come up and say, you know what, nurse practitioner, you're not very useful and you're really a big cost, and maybe I'll get rid of you and just hire an RN. Doctors look at us as nurse practitioners as a cost, which is not a cost. We are revenue-producing powerhouses. We are revenue-producing bodies. We should be generating charges, payments, and adjustments against the work we are doing. Whether it's billed under his name or our name or whose ever name, it's work we were rendering and we should get credit for, and you should see that. We should have our detailed service of how many new patients, how many total encounters, how many things did you bill. When you see a patient and you do counseling and you do a wart removal, there's 2-3 things that are units attached to a single encounter. You should know what are you doing to defend yourself. You need to know, hey, work RVUs. In one of the posts I just posted today, I talked about the doctor who saw 4 patients and the nurse practitioner who saw 2 patients, and actually with 2 patients generated more output than the doctor who saw 4 patients. So if you didn't see that, go back to the discussion board and look at that piece, because the work RVU is about who's actually working. Goes back to the model of, if I saw a patient and you saw a patient, and my patient was a level 5 complex medical decision making, and yours was straightforward, low complexity, I'm actually going to get more credit because my work was greater than your work, even though we both saw 1 patient. That's what the work RVU is all about. Performance. I know my gross collection rate is, 39.1% or whatever, and I know I had $100,000 of charges. If I do the math on a 29.1 days in accounts receivable, I know how much money should be coming in the door this month. So should you. so should the whole world in your practice to make sure the business office are meeting their collection thresholds. Where is my money? There's that accounts receivable. Okay, great. 12% over 91 days in the analogy I just had. Why? What is going on with it? There's no reason I can't ask that question. What are my collections per encounter? Charges per encounter is another indicator. You want to look at this year to last year? Hey, this is a slow month. Oh, well, it's always a slow month this time of year. Prove it. Show me last year's numbers. Don't just tell me that because you took a 2-week vacation and you're calling it a seasonal issue with pulmonary issues or something. No, show me a comparison that says this is always a down dip, and we have the data and numbers to show it. We also want to look at what are our indicators. It's all the prior slides. I should be able to have those numbers every month and take a look at those. Now, they're not going to be a month-to-month number. They're going to be a 12-month, rolling 12-month, rolling 6-month, whatever time threshold you have, but you're going to look at those numbers on an ongoing basis, not a calendar month look again, but a rolling basis of 12 months, 9 months, 6 months or something to know our roller coaster is coming back with 20 people when we send 20 people out. Best practices, that's just making, that's more or less peer review. That's putting pressure on your business office to say everybody else is doing it better. Why can't you do it better? Doctor's no different. Access standards. If you don't buy tickets to the amusement park, nobody's getting on the roller coaster and I'm not making money. So while you'd say access standards aren't necessarily an issue related to the revenue process, oh, it very much is, because if people aren't showing up and constantly rescheduling, because I schedule people out a year for their physicals, who from now knows what they're doing in a year from now? That's just crazy. But practices do that and wonder why their no-show rates are so great. You know what? Retool your whole thought process around that to say, I want high access standards. Maybe do open scheduling. There's different approaches to make sure you can get the people in the practice to generate the revenue you need. So those are also indicators that you should take a look at. So we gained some familiarity with the tools you should be monitoring of your performance, some of the benchmarks and metrics, and really to pull it all together, you need to continually measure and monitor what's going on in your practice. Not annually, potentially some elements quarterly, but you've got to measure and compare the indicators. You need to set up internal benchmarking specific to your specialty and your practice to look at what is going to be the financial health of our practice. I can't just go to work, see patients, collect my paycheck, go home, and then complain when people are wanting to cut my paycheck, and complain when they're telling me I'm not working hard enough. You're not even monitoring the work you're doing to have any sense to know, you know what, I'm sorry, I saw 4,000 RVUs, and go through the numbers and math with people when they start pushing you. But if you don't have the data to know it, hey, what are you supposed to do? They're just going to come at you and say, look, don't worry about it. You're not doing well. It's going to cut your paycheck. You need to continually have your internal benchmarking within your practice. You're a revenue-producing body in that practice. Even if you're not a partner, you're contributing. How often do I get nurse practitioners that say, hey, I just got nailed that the guy either wants to eliminate one of us or we're getting our salary reduced because they can't cover our salary. And I know I'm doing all this work. Well, we go back through this whole process and we look at the whole revenue process and we go through basically the discussion of what you're learning here and saying, you know what, you better shadow chart what you're doing so we can kind of annualize the numbers. How many phone calls are you doing? That's a billable RVU. Might not be payable, but it's something you charge capture. What are you doing? And so those are the kinds of things we look at. So again, constantly look at measuring and comparing your key work processes, know what your indicators should be, and then the internal benchmarking. When you put all this together and you lay this and layer this on top of that 8-step revenue process, my goodness, we got a powerhouse. That's going to be amazing. So that hopefully will give you an appreciation on the impact of the management reporting and what you can do with these reports to make sure I know why people are dying on my roller coaster, and I also know the right spot to where to fix it so I can have financial stability and growth. And that is it. So thanks so much, and I look forward to the next module with you.